Hello, this is Professor Warewith. I wanted to talk about electric vehicle courtesy today because I've just spent quite a bit of time driving, pretty good distance, probably about a 300-mile trip locally here in the Chicago area using my EV. And I did kind of recognize and kind of absorb, if you will, some of the cultural implications of what was going on around me. In general, I found EV drivers to be very courteous to each other, and also in some cases a little bit confused about how the technology works, but also in some cases being very helpful to each other and being hopefully patient, because there's a variety of users out there, those that are expert and those that are novice, and we have to be patient with all. Okay, with that, let's get started. I want to cover both culture and protocol for this, what I'm calling this new public activity. In terms of culture, EV owners are still something of a minority in most communities. In fact, I drive an EV6 from Kia. I tend to flash my lights at other Kia EV6 owners. I feel like there's probably about 4 of them in my community versus maybe dozens and dozens of Tesla owners. So I'm a minority within a minority, okay? I've got an unusual EV that's not well known or recognized. I get a lot of people asking questions. I try to be patient with them. I always find time to answer them. And I try to tell them the good and the bad. And for the most part, my experiences have been either good or very good with my car. So I'm proud of it, and I'm happy with it, and I'm happy to share with others. And I'm hoping all of you are the same way. If you've got an EV, please be willing to share your experiences with others. In some cases, we share a passion for this technology. Sometimes it's because it's new or different. Sometimes because it's going to save the planet or it's going to be good for the environment. Whatever the reason, whatever the situation, it is a shared experience. In fact, there's owners clubs, there's get-togethers with EV, shows, if you will, where EVs are on display. And I've attended quite a bit of them, many of them. And even to this day, 2023, there is this sense of novelty, sense of excitement, almost like the early days of any new technology. Imagine personal computers in the early days. They had clubs. They had all sorts of, ways of people getting together. Just beware, as owning an EV is still a bit of an oddity. It's still probably true that your dealer themselves do not know how to fully service your vehicle. They may not understand all the subtleties of the vehicle. Independent mechanics may not understand either. Some of them might even refuse to work on your car. The car company itself may be at a loss as to how the customers are using the product, so just be aware of that. I suggest, and this is just my recommendation, every EV owner, in order to feel a little less isolated and a little bit more knowledgeable, to join an online club. For example, Chevy Bolt. I have a Chevy Bolt as well as my Kia. Chevy Bolt has a group called chevybolt.org, and I think you can basically get into that and start reading about other people's experiences, recommendations, suggestions. I also suggested you give your local mechanic a chance. If they're willing to work on your car, if you think and believe they have good general skills, I suspect about 70% of the work can, and in many cases should be done by them, whether it's tires, wipers, brakes, fluids, suspension. Those are the things that are pretty much common to most of these vehicles. And of course, there's things like software and electric vehicle technology that they probably should not touch, and let that stay with the actual dealer themselves, because they probably are the expert. Not every dealer is as expert as another, so find the dealer in your area that really understands your car the best. I'm going to talk about private and public charging, starting with private. Whether you do 110 or 240, that of course, that's your decision. I started with 240, assuming I needed it. In hindsight, I probably didn't, at least when I had one car. Now that I have 2 cars, it's arguable, but 110 would require a lot more time plugged in, depending on how many miles you drive. Just recognize too that charging late at night is best for the grid. What's best for the grid is often best for you financially. So these utilities will give you preferential rates for charging at night. Check with your utility and what they will likely call a time of use program. And in ComEd here in Chicago, we would call that an hourly program. So hourly pricing is something that has saved me well over 30% over the years because of the fact that I charge at night. It's best, of course, to keep your equipment secured and out of sight of the public, unless you intend the public to use your charger. Some people do. They mount it in such a way that anyone can access it. If that's the case, then make sure you list your charger on PlugShare. PlugShare is it's a free app that people use to share information about EV charging. When using your EVSE, which is your charger, it is best to position it so that it doesn't block others from accessing their driveway or garage, right? Beware of local codes, local ordinances. Always use a licensed electrician to wire your receptacle properly to your panel. Make sure you have a dedicated circuit, whether it's 110 or 240, it must be a dedicated circuit. Lastly, this NEMA 1450 receptacle, I have a picture of it in the upper right. Make sure that it is properly enclosed if you're using it outside. I recommend 1450 receptacles, even indoors. And the reason for that is if you can plug and unplug your EVSE, your charger, when it's time for you to leave and possibly relocate or switch out to a new EVSE, if it's not hardwired, it's a lot easier to plug and unplug. So I recommend that, especially since the equipment can evolve over time. I've kept mine for the last 6 years, but some people might want a new one every couple of years, in which case not hardwiring it and using a plug is probably your best bet, at least from a cost perspective. And I'm assuming, of course, your utility and your local codes will allow this. In terms of public charging, please don't block access to a public charger unless you're actively charging. However, your position and how your car is positioned can be impacting others and how they're parked and how they could be parked. So be courteous, try not to block others as you charge, right? Move on quickly after your session is complete. Don't sit there and have that extra dessert, or don't sit there and wait until your waiter comes by. If your session is complete, please move your car. There might very well be somebody waiting for you. Never touch another EV car or charging cable while charging. So that's not just discourteous. I mean, that could be misinterpreted a lot of different ways. So please be wary of the fact that others are very sensitive about who touches their car, and that charging cable is not yours, it's theirs, as long as it's plugged into their car, right? If given an option, use the charging speed that's appropriate to your vehicle. So if you have a Chevy Bolt, that only charges to 50 kW. Don't use a 350 kW charger if a slower one is available, please, because what you're doing by using the 350, you're blocking somebody who can use that fast charge, that faster charge, and you're dooming them to use something slower. So just be courteous and be aware. Understand your own car's max charging speed and act accordingly. Okay. DC fast charge, right? There are 2 cables on this EVSE. This is an Electrify America charging station. This is classic, right? Charging cable, 1 on the left, 2 on the right. Well, here's the problem. You can only use 1 at a time. I want that to sink in, please, because so many people don't get it. They assume there's 2 cables. You can plug 2 different cars in. You cannot, at least as of 2023, as of the version of equipment we've been using up until now, only 1 at a time is allowed. So please, if you try to touch the screen, log in yourself, grab the second cord, plug it into your car, whatever you do, if you succeed, you're probably succeeding first and foremost at ruining somebody else's charging session. They will be upset. They will get angry with you. And more than likely, you won't get your charging session started anyway. So you would have made an enemy, or at least start a negative discussion, and at the same time probably not accomplish much for yourself. Don't ask why there's 2 cords. My understanding is one is the backup to the other. They're not intended to work independently, right? Don't be surprised if the rated charging speed is not achieved. This could say 350 kilowatts if your car is not equipped, if the temperature is not right, if the battery state of charge is too high or too low. Frankly, the 350 is hardly ever achieved by anybody at any time, under any circumstances. So, and some cars just simply aren't even engineered to support it, right? Again, use the charging speed appropriate for your car. Don't use the CHAdeMO charging machine if indeed you don't own a CHAdeMO vehicle. use it only if you have no other choice, right? If that's the last one available and you need to charge, I don't think anyone would criticize you for that. But if you're blocking some other CHAdeMO vehicle when you could have used some other charging station, shame on you, right? Try to leave a review on PlugShare so others know if your experience is good or bad, right? Especially the bad ones, because that will warn people about the current state of that equipment and which specific charging stations are working and not working. If you can, try to stay with your car while charging. It'll avoid a lot of issues and confusion as to what's happening and who's working where. I know that you sometimes have to step away, and I've done it myself. Just be aware when you come back, you could wind up being surprised with somebody who's trying to use your charging station without your knowledge. Lastly, queuing. This happens when you have too many cars waiting to use too few stations. If all those slots are filled, then start to form an orderly queue that doesn't block other users and drivers, but remains in line of sight with the others, right? Stay with your car. Please stay with your car if you're waiting, because you never know when the next station will open up and somebody will likely jump in front of you if you're not at your car. So first come, first served is pretty much the standard. It will be followed, but you must stay with your car. Otherwise, you abandon your spot in line when somebody else sees an opening. Let new entrants know who's in line ahead of them and which chargers are working. If someone in queue goes to a malfunctioning charger, they should be able to retain their original place in the queue. So let them go back to the queue if it turns out that their station doesn't work. So those are some of the basics in terms of courtesy and protocol that I've witnessed at the EV charging stations. Try to keep these areas neat and clean. I know they don't have garbage cans. I know they don't have picnic tables. I know they don't have squeegees for your window. Hopefully all those things will start coming in time as more competition erupts, as well as Electrify America gets its act together. Be patient. I mean, they've done the rollout as quickly as they can. And in turn, some of these chargers are not fully functional, and you're going to have to be patient with your fellow user. And there's always a 1-800 number posted. So if you find yourself in a real bind or a real trouble spot, call the 1-800 number. They can do a remote restart of that station, and that often solves many of the problems, especially with software malfunction. So with that, I will end the session, and thank you for your time today.